We're going to be talking about Vox AC4 AMP mods today. I did a previous video on this, and this is basically an update, as I've tried many more things in my AC4, and I've come a long way in the betterment of the tone of the amp. So this will cover the AC4C1, which is out, and this will also cover the AC4TV. They are pretty much the same amp, very similar circuit, the same crappy speaker, just a different color, and one has the top boost of an AC30. The other is just more of like a normal channel type amp. So when you buy an AC4, basically what you're getting is a 1x10 amp in a MDF particle board box about this big. And particle board will affect your tone, but only when you crank the amp. So that's where materials like solid pine or Baltic birch will outperform MDF. So the most logical modification one can make to this amp is to just change out the speaker. The speakers I'd really like to talk about are the Weber Alnico Blue Pop and the Weber Alnico Silver 10. Both of these speakers are under $100. They're handmade in the United States. I have had two AC4s, one with the Blue Pop and one with the Silver 10. Now you're probably wondering what's the difference between the speakers. There's a huge difference between the speakers. The Silver 10 is modeled after a vintage Alnico Marshall 10-inch speaker, and the Weber Blue Pop is modeled after, a vintage 10-inch Vox speaker. So what you get with the Blue Pop is that Vox chiminess, a warmth with it, and an overdrive, which I want to say is thicker and a little bit muddy. However, the cleans are really nice with like a very nice low end and an airy top end. The Silver 10, in my opinion, sounds better in this amp, and the reason why is the cleans maybe aren't as nice, but the bass is tighter, and this amp needs help in that area. And the overdrive is absolutely awesome. It is a longer period of overdrive into distortion, and it's like a sweet spot. It's like it opens up a sweet spot for the amp. So I highly recommend the Silver 10 for this amp. Although I sold the Silver 10 and kept the Weber Blue Pop in the speaker you see, the amplifier you see behind me. The next most logical modification one can make to the AC4 is to change out the tubes. Now I know what you guys are thinking. You're gonna run over to Euro Tubes and buy JJs. I did the same thing. Big mistake when you know better. You could put vintage tubes in the AC4, and you only have 2 tubes to worry about, or 3 tubes if you have the C1 version. It's really not a huge cost when you look at it. Now, there's a couple different directions you can go. You can go 12AT7, you can go 5751, or you can go 12AX7. Stock, the amp comes with a 12AX7, so that's 190 to 100% gain value. You could put a 5751, which is an equivalent to a 12AX7, except it's a lower gain. It's about 70 to 80%, I believe. And this will allow for more clean headroom. And about the same breakup, which is kind of strange. In my opinion, I've found that they break up about the same way as a 12AX7. Now, if you really want to clean up this amp and have much more headroom, like I'm talking all the way to 12 o'clock, the best way to go is to put a 12AT7 in the amp. Now, the 12AT7 will work in the circuit. It, however, does thin the amp out a little bit. It's not going to have as fat and punchy of a sound as the 12AX7 or the 5751. If you play like jazz, stuff like that, where you need to be really, really clean, I say put a 12AT7 in it. If you are kind of someone who plays a lot of different styles, I'd say 5751. If you're going to crank the amp, go for the 12AX7. Now, I've tried about 30 different vintage tubes in this amp because I've had access to these tubes. So I've just tube rolled and seen what I liked. I actually have videos up on YouTube of the different tubes in this amp, which I will put links to below. The tube that worked best for this amp that I thought was the Philips ECG 12AX7. What this does, it has characteristics very similar to a 5751 where it allows for more headroom. It adds clarity to the amp and it really tightens the bass, and that's where this amp it needs help. As far as the 5751s go, you can get a GE Jan 5751 from the 70s for about $14. It's actually the same price as a JJ, and it's a no-brainer. Go with the older tube, and you will see a dramatic difference over a JJ or the stock tube. I'm talking a dramatic difference. Even people who don't have an ear for music notice a difference. As far as the 12AT7s go, one I can recommend that's cheap is the GE Jan 12AX7 WA or WC. You can find this tube for $8 a piece. And again, the difference will be dramatic when compared to a JJ 12AX7 ECC81 or any other of the new production tubes. As far as power tubes go, it's going to be way more difficult to hear a change in tone. The best power tube out there, and I highly recommend this, is the Tungsram EL84. It sounds like a Telefunken EL84 at 1/4 the cost. If you look hard enough, you can find a vintage EL84 for around, $20, $30, at most $40. And it doesn't matter the brand, as long as it was made before, the 1990s, it will perform much better and last much longer. I wasn't going to include this in my talk, but you could change out the transformers in the amp. Now, this is a really expensive mod. We're talking about $250. And then adding on top of that the installation if you can't do it yourself. I don't think it's worth it for this amp because it's a $250 amp. And if you've done the tube and a speaker upgrade, you're already looking at a $400 amp. So, if you feel so inclined, there is a company that makes transformers for the AC4. I have no experience with how it sounds. I have heard great things about it, but Mercury Magnetics is the company. So mercurymagnetics.com, and you'll find an AC4 kit where they also include a capacitor upgrade, so it will require some knowledge of electronics to perform. Other than that, enjoy your AC4. If you want to hear how mine sounds, check out the links below. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.